Only 1% of people can sense these cosmic signs, and you are one of them. There is something happening inside you that you have never been able to fully explain to another person, not because the words don't exist, but because the experience sits in a place that language was never quite designed to reach. A place where anxiety and awareness share the same breath, where sensitivity feels indistinguishable from suffering, where you have spent more nights than you can count lying awake, not because something is wrong exactly, but because something in you refuses to stop feeling. You have tried to manage it. You have tried to outthink it, outrun it, outlast it. You have built systems and routines and reasons why things will be fine. And still, it returns. That low, persistent hum beneath the surface of your days. That sense that you are carrying something heavier than what the eye can see. Most people around you do not feel this way. Or if they do, they have learned to bury it so efficiently that you sometimes wonder if something is fundamentally different about you. And you would be right. Something is different, not broken, not disordered. Different in the way that a tuning fork is different from the objects around it. Because it was made to resonate, to pick up frequencies that everything else ignores. What you are about to hear is not a self-help prescription. It is not a list of habits or a framework for productivity or a gentle suggestion to breathe more deeply. It is something far more precise than that. It is the moment the universe stops speaking in whispers and begins to speak clearly. Through the exact pain you have been carrying, through the signs you have been sensing but could not yet name, through the ancient laws that govern not just the stars above you, but the life moving inside you right now. There is a reason you are here. Not here as in watching this video, but here as in alive, awake, aware, and searching at this particular intersection of time and experience. That reason is not random. Nothing about your path has been random. And by the time this ends, you will not just believe that. You will know it in the part of you that has always known things before your mind gave it permission. 1% of people can sense what you have been sensing. 1% can feel the pull of something larger than circumstance, something older than explanation, something that moves beneath the noise of daily life like a current beneath still water. You are in that 1%. You have always been. And this, right now, is where your understanding of why begins. The exhaustion nobody talks about. There is a kind of tired that sleep does not fix. You already know this. You have woken up after 8 hours and felt it still sitting there, settled into your chest like something that belongs to you now. Not fatigue from work or from the demands of your schedule, but something older than that. Something that was already there before the day began. A weariness that comes not from doing too much but from feeling too much for too long, without anyone ever handing you the language to describe it. The world has names for physical exhaustion. It has clinical terms for depression, for burnout, for anxiety disorders. But there is no word in common use for what happens to a soul that has been acutely, relentlessly awake in a world designed for people who are not. A soul that processes every room it walks into, every shift in someone's tone, every silence that carries more weight than the words surrounding it. A soul that cannot simply let things pass because letting things pass has never been part of its architecture. This is not a flaw in your design, but it has cost you something real. It has cost you the ease that other people seem to carry naturally, the ability to move through difficulty without internalizing it, the capacity to hear bad news and shake it off by morning. You have watched people do these things and felt a quiet, private bewilderment, wondering what they possess that you were somehow not given. The answer is not that they are stronger. The answer is that they are operating on a different frequency entirely. And a radio tower built to receive every signal on the spectrum will always work harder than one that only catches 2 or 3. You were built to receive everything. That is extraordinary. It is also, without the right understanding, completely unsustainable. Because when you do not know why you feel so much, the only conclusion available to you is that something is wrong with you. And so you have spent years managing that conclusion, apologizing for your sensitivity, minimizing your reactions, pushing through the exhaustion with discipline and willpower, treating your own depth as an inconvenience to be corrected rather than a capacity to be understood. The weight you have been carrying is not weakness. It is unrecognized perception. It is awareness without a framework. It is the experience of someone who can sense the full architecture of reality, but was never given the tools to read the blueprints. Here is what no one told you about that kind of tiredness. It does not mean you are falling apart. It means you have been holding yourself together with methods that were never meant to carry this much. You were using control where surrender was called for. You were using effort where alignment was the answer. You were fighting a battle on the wrong terrain, not because you were lost, but because no one showed you where the actual ground was. That changes here. Not because this is the moment all the weight disappears, but because this is the moment you begin to understand what the weight actually is. And a burden you can name is a burden you can finally set down. The exhaustion you have been living inside is not a signal that you are too much. It is a signal that you have been living at a fraction of your actual understanding. Something in you has been trying to reach you for a long time now. Not through ambition or achievement, but through the very overwhelm you have been trying to escape. The question is not how to feel less. The question is what all of this feeling has been trying to show you. Why you were never meant to control everything. At some point in your life, someone, or everything around you, taught you that safety was something you could build. That if you planned carefully enough, thought far enough ahead, anticipated every possible outcome and prepared for each one, you could construct a life in which nothing truly terrible could reach you. And so you learned to grip, to monitor, to run every scenario through the architecture of your mind before it had a chance to arrive uninvited. You learned to treat uncertainty not as a natural condition of being alive, but as a problem to be solved through sufficient vigilance. And for a while, it worked. Or it seemed to. Because the illusion of control is convincing precisely because it is partial. You do control some things. Your effort, your choices, your words in a given moment. And those real, legitimate areas of influence became the foundation for a much larger belief. That if you extended that same effort far enough, held on tightly enough, you could bring the whole of your life under the jurisdiction of your will. That belief is not a character flaw. It is a survival strategy. One that was handed to you by a world that celebrates control, rewards certainty, and treats surrender as something dangerously close to failure. You absorbed it not because you were naive, but because you were paying attention to what the world around you said it valued. But here is what that belief has quietly cost you. Every time life moved in a direction you did not choose, you did not experience it simply as change. You experienced it as evidence that you had failed to control it. Every unexpected loss, every door that closed without your permission, every relationship that shifted in ways your planning could not prevent, each one became not just a painful event, but a verdict. Proof that you had not been vigilant enough, that you needed to grip harder next time. And so the cycle deepened. More control attempted. More exhaustion generated. More of your inner life spent in the future, rehearsing catastrophes that mostly never arrived, and the ones that did arrive were never quite the ones you had prepared for anyway. The war you have been fighting was never between you and your circumstances. It was between you and a premise you were given before you were old enough to question it. The premise that safety lives on the other side of sufficient control. That peace is what remains after you have managed everything into order. That premise is the source of your suffering. Not your sensitivity, not your past, not the specific events that broke something open in you. The premise itself. Because it positioned you as the sole architect of a structure that no single human being was ever designed to hold alone. The ancient Stoic teachers understood something about this that the modern world has nearly forgotten. They did not teach indifference to life. They taught something far more precise and far more demanding than indifference. They taught the discipline of distinguishing, with ruthless clarity, between what is genuinely within your power and what has never belonged to you at all. Not as a resignation from life, but as the most honest and courageous act of self-knowledge available to a thinking soul. Your thoughts, your intentions, your response to what arrives. These are yours, completely and irrevocably yours. The opinions others form of you, the timing of events, the choices of people you love, the direction the current moves, these were never yours. not for a single moment. And every ounce of energy you have spent trying to govern them has been energy borrowed from the life you were actually here to live. This is not a comfortable realization. It requires you to look honestly at the architecture of your daily anxiety and recognize, perhaps for the first time, that most of what you have been afraid of losing was never yours to keep. Most of what you have been trying to secure was never in your jurisdiction, and that recognition, as disorienting as it feels right now, is the first honest breath you have taken in a very long time. Because if the problem was never your inability to control enough, then the solution was never more control. The solution is something the anxious mind resists with everything it has, because it sounds at first terrifyingly close to giving up. It is not giving up. It is something the exhausted, gripping, vigilant part of you has never once been shown how to do. And the universe has been trying to teach it to you through every single moment you could not control, no matter how hard you tried. The frequency the universe uses to reach you. There was a moment, and you remember it even if you have never spoken it aloud, when something happened that could not be explained by coincidence alone. Maybe it was a number that appeared 3 times in a single hour, on a license plate, on a receipt, on the clock, at the exact moment you were thinking about a decision that was weighing on you. Maybe it was a song that came on at the precise instant you needed its words, as though someone had chosen it for you. Maybe it was a stranger who said something so specific, so impossibly aligned with what was moving silently through your interior world, that you looked around afterward as if expecting to find a stage direction written somewhere. You felt it land, that unmistakable sensation of contact, of something reaching through the fabric of ordinary life and touching you directly. And then almost immediately the rational mind arrived to clean it up. Coincidence, it said. Pattern recognition. The brain finds meaning because it is designed to find meaning. Nothing more. And you accepted that explanation, because the alternative, that the universe was actually communicating with you personally, through the texture of your daily experience, sounded like something you were not quite permitted to believe. But consider what that explanation requires you to dismiss. It requires you to dismiss the consistency, because it was never just once. It was a pattern, returning across months and years, showing up at the precise intersections of your life where something was shifting, breaking open, or being asked of you. Coincidence is random by definition. What you have been experiencing is not random. It is structured. It is responsive. It moves in relationship to your inner state in a way that pure chance cannot account for. The universe does not communicate through announcements. It does not interrupt your life with clarity and a clear sender address. It speaks in the language of pattern, repetition, and synchronicity, a language that operates beneath the threshold of the analytical mind, designed to be felt before it is understood. It reaches you through the very channels that your rational education told you to distrust. Through instinct, through resonance, through that quiet cellular recognition that something means something, even when you cannot yet say what. This is not mysticism dressed up as science. This is a sophisticated system of correspondence that has been documented, studied, and articulated by some of the most rigorous minds in human history. The ancient Hermetic principle of correspondence states that the outer world is always a reflection of the inner world. As within, so without. As above, so below. What moves in the invisible interior of your experience will always find its mirror in the visible exterior of your reality. The signs you encounter are not being sent from outside your life into it. They are being generated at the intersection of your consciousness and the fabric of reality itself. Your sensitivity is the instrument through which this language reaches you. This is why the 1% who sense these signs are not more gifted in any conventional sense. They are simply less defended, less insulated by the noise of certainty, less committed to the explanation that reduces everything to mechanism. They have, whether consciously or not, left a door open that most people sealed shut in the name of practicality, and through that door the universe moves freely, leaving its signatures in the ordinary moments of an extraordinary life. The number that keeps finding you is not a superstition, it is a coordinate. The song that arrived at the wrong time and the right moment was not a coincidence. It was correspondence. The stranger whose words reached something unreachable was not random. Nothing on your path has been random. The entire architecture of your experience has been a conversation, and you have been participating in it far longer than you realized. What changes now is not the frequency of the signs. They have always been there, arriving at the same rate, with the same precision. What changes is your willingness to receive them without immediately dismantling what they mean. What changes is your relationship with the part of you that has always known how to listen, before the noise convinced you that listening was the same thing as losing your mind. You are not built to live on the surface of things, and the universe has never once spoken to you from there. The law that governs everything you have ever felt. There is a law that operates beneath every experience you have ever had. Not a rule invented by religion or enforced by culture, but a structural principle woven into the fabric of existence itself, as fundamental as gravity and as indifferent to your belief in it as the tide. It does not require your agreement to function. It does not pause while you debate its validity. It has been operating in your life since before you had the words to describe what your life was, shaping the texture of your days with the same quiet consistency that water shapes stone, not through force, but through the relentless logic of its own nature. It is called the law of vibration, and it explains with a precision that no other framework quite manages why you feel what you feel, attract what you attract, and find yourself returning again and again to the same emotional terrain no matter how many external circumstances you rearrange. Everything in the physical universe at its most fundamental level is not matter. It is energy in motion. This is not a metaphor. It is the foundational finding of quantum physics, that what appears solid, fixed, and separate is, at the subatomic level, a field of vibrating energy, differentiated not by substance, but by frequency. The chair, the air, the thought moving through your mind right now, the emotion sitting in your chest as you read these words. All of it is energy, and all of it is vibrating at a specific, measurable frequency. Your emotional states are not just feelings. They are frequencies, and like all frequencies, they do not stay contained within the borders of your skin. They radiate outward into the field of reality around you, and reality reflects back whatever is vibrating most consistently in your interior world. This is why the circumstances of your outer life have always felt strangely faithful to the circumstances of your inner life. Not because you are imagining the connection, but because the connection is structural. You are not a passive observer moving through a pre-constructed reality. You are an active frequency, continuously and unavoidably participating in the creation of the reality around you. Now pause with that for a moment, because this is where the understanding splits into two very different directions, and the direction you take matters enormously. The first direction is the one the self-help industry took and then abandoned people inside of. If you simply think positive thoughts and feel good emotions, reality will reorganize itself to match. This interpretation is seductive, and it contains a kernel of truth, but it fails in practice because it addresses the surface of the law without ever reaching its depth. It tells you to manage your frequency without ever helping you understand what has been governing your frequency all along. The second direction is the one the ancient teachers pointed toward, and it is far more demanding and far more liberating than the first. It begins not with positive thinking, but with radical honesty about what frequency you have actually been living in, not what you wish you felt, not the emotional state you perform for the world or even for yourself, but the actual persistent underlying frequency of your interior life, the emotional weather that is running beneath every surface state you have ever managed. For most sensitive, aware people, that underlying frequency has been one of sustained low-level vigilance, a background hum of anticipating difficulty, a posture of preparing for loss, for rejection, for the thing that will inevitably go wrong, not because you are pessimistic, not because you have failed to work on yourself, but because that frequency was installed early, reinforced consistently, and has been operating so far beneath your conscious awareness that you have confused it with reality itself, rather than recognizing it as a frequency you are transmitting. And by the law that governs everything, that frequency has been your most powerful creative force. The relationships that confirmed your fears, the opportunities that arrived at the wrong moment, the pattern of reaching a certain threshold and then watching things collapse. These were not punishments. They were not evidence of your unworthiness. They were the precise, faithful output of a frequency you were never shown how to change, because you were never shown that you were transmitting it in the first place. The law of vibration does not judge the frequency you are broadcasting. It does not punish low frequencies or reward high ones in any moral sense. It simply mirrors. It reflects back with perfect fidelity whatever is most consistently, most deeply vibrating within you. And because it operates without judgment, it can be worked with, genuinely, fundamentally shifted, once you understand the actual mechanism by which frequencies change. They do not change through effort. They do not change through discipline or willpower or the relentless management of your thoughts. They change through experience, through the cellular, undeniable encounter with a frequency higher than the one you have been living in, through moments of genuine beauty, genuine connection, genuine awe, moments that do not argue you into a new frequency, but simply demonstrate it so clearly that your entire system recalibrates around the encounter. You have had these moments. They are the ones you remember with a clarity that ordinary time cannot touch. The ones where something opened and you felt, briefly and completely, what it was like to exist without the weight. Those moments were not accidents. They were transmissions. The universe showing you, at the level of direct experience, the frequency that is your original state, the one that was yours before the vigilance, before the grief, before the long education in bracing for impact. You are not trying to reach somewhere new. You are trying to return somewhere ancient. And the law that governs everything you have ever felt is not your obstacle. It is your compass. What your pain has been trying to tell you. Pain is not a malfunction. This is the thing the modern world has gotten most catastrophically wrong about suffering. In a culture organized around the elimination of discomfort, pain has been repositioned as the enemy. Something to be managed, medicated, outrun, or explained away as quickly as possible so that normal functioning can resume. And so you have learned, as most people have, to treat your pain as an interruption, as evidence that something has gone wrong, as a problem requiring a solution rather than a communication requiring a listener. But the body does not malfunction when it sends pain. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is transmitting information that could not get through any other way. And the same is true of everything else you have called pain in your life. The emotional variety, the existential variety, the kind that does not have a clean source and therefore cannot have a clean solution. The grief that arrived without warning. The hollow feeling that settled in during what should have been a good period. The ache of longing for something you cannot quite name. The anger that rose up from a place you were not expecting. None of it was random. None of it was punishment. All of it was language, spoken by the deepest part of you to the part of you that has been too busy managing the surface to stop and read what was being written underneath. The question your pain has always been asking is not, why is this happening to me? The question it has been asking is, what have you been unwilling to look at? This is not an accusation. It is an invitation. Because the things we are unwilling to look at are never the things we consciously chose to avoid. They are the things that were too large, too tender, or too threatening to the architecture of survival we had already built. You did not avoid your pain out of weakness. You avoided it because looking at it directly, without the armor of control or the distraction of busyness or the comfort of a narrative that made someone else responsible, required a kind of courage that no one had shown you how to locate in yourself. So the pain waited, as it always does, with the patience of something that has nowhere else to be. Carl Jung spent the better part of his life's work describing what he called the shadow, not the darkness in us, as the word is so often misread, but the wholeness in us that we have not yet claimed. The parts of the self that were deemed unacceptable, inconvenient, or too frightening to integrate, and so were pushed below the threshold of awareness where they continued to operate, shaping behavior from the underground, surfacing as symptoms rather than as the self-knowledge they were always meant to become. Your pain, in this framework, is not what is wrong with you. It is what is most authentically you, asking to be brought home. Every persistent pain in your life points toward an unmet truth, not always a dramatic one, not always the revelation of a hidden trauma or a buried wound. Sometimes the truth is quieter than that. Sometimes it is simply the truth that you have been living according to values that are not your own, that you have been maintaining a version of yourself designed for someone else's comfort, that you have been so focused on keeping things together that you have had no attention left for what you actually feel about the life you are living. The Sufi poets understood pain as proximity. Rumi wrote of the reed flute crying not from loss, but from separation. From the reed bed it was cut from, the source from which it came, the wholeness it remembered in its deepest cellular memory. The crying of the flute is not suffering. It is longing. And longing is not an absence of meaning. It is the most precise kind of meaning available to the human heart. It tells you with absolute accuracy the direction of what is most real to you. Your longing is a compass. Your grief is a map. Your anger is a boundary that was violated before you knew you had the right to one. Your anxiety is a future that you have been trying to control because the present has felt too uncertain to rest inside. Every form your pain has taken has been a specific message in a language you were never formally taught, but that some part of you has always understood. And here is what the message has always been. Beneath every variation, beneath every form it has taken across every chapter of your life, you are further from yourself than you were meant to be. Come back. Not back to a previous version of your life. Not back to a time before the difficulty. Back to the frequency that is yours before the world started layering its demands and expectations and fears over the original signal. Back to the self that existed before you learned to be useful, before you learned to be manageable, before you learned that your fullness was too much and began the long project of making yourself smaller. Your pain has been pointing there the entire time. It has never been pointing toward something being wrong with you. It has been pointing toward the distance between where you are and where you belong. That distance is closable. Not through effort, not through another strategy or another framework or another attempt to understand your way out of feeling, but through the radical, ultimately liberating act of turning toward what hurts with the quality of attention you have spent your whole life giving to everything and everyone except this. The pain has been waiting, not to destroy you, to return you to yourself. And it has been extraordinarily patient. Why you keep attracting the same experiences? You have noticed the pattern. Maybe you have not named it directly, or maybe you have named it so many times that the naming itself has become part of the pattern. But you have seen it. The relationship that begins differently and ends the same way. The opportunity that opens with genuine promise and closes with a familiar disappointment. The dynamic that shows up wearing different faces, different names, different contexts, different decades, but carrying the same emotional signature as everything that came before it. The same lesson, the same ache, the same moment of recognition where something in you says, quietly and without surprise, here we are again. The common explanation is bad luck, or a broken picker, or some variation of the belief that the world is simply organized against you in this particular way. And there is a comfort in that explanation, because it locates the problem outside of you and leaves your own interior architecture untouched. But you already know the comfort is false, because you have tried changing the external variables. You have chosen differently, moved differently, started over in new places with new people and new intentions, and the pattern followed you there, not because you are cursed, not because you are broken, but because the pattern was never in the external circumstances to begin with. It was always in the frequency you were broadcasting before the circumstances arrived. Your dominant emotional frequency, not your conscious intentions, not your stated preferences, not the version of yourself you present in your best moments, but the persistent, underlying emotional frequency running beneath all of it, acts as a signal, and reality, faithfully and without judgment, returns to you what matches that signal. If the frequency running beneath your conscious life is one of unworthiness, reality will consistently produce experiences that confirm unworthiness. Not because you deserve them, not because the universe is punishing you, but because unworthiness is the signal and confirmation is what gets reflected back. If the frequency is one of anticipated abandonment, people will leave, or you will unconsciously create the conditions that make leaving inevitable, or you will stay in relationships that feel like leaving even when no one physically goes. The specific form changes. The frequency underneath stays the same. And here is the part that requires the most honesty to sit with. The pattern is not being done to you. You are the one transmitting the frequency that organizes the pattern, which means you are the only one who can actually change it. Not by trying harder to choose better people, not by constructing more careful boundaries, but by doing the one thing that every previous strategy has been designed, consciously or not, to avoid: going down into the frequency itself and meeting whatever is living there. Beneath every repeating pattern is a belief. Not a thought you chose, not a conclusion you reached through reason, but a belief in the oldest sense. A truth that was written into your nervous system by an experience early enough and significant enough that your entire system organized itself around it as though it were simply the nature of reality. I am not enough. I am too much. I will be left. I do not deserve what I want. Love always costs me something vital. These are not ideas you hold. They are frequencies you inhabit. And they are so familiar that they have become invisible, not because they are hidden, but because they are everywhere. The repeating pattern is the invitation to see what has been everywhere. Every time the same experience arrives again, it is not punishment. It is precision. The universe is not being cruel. It is being exact. It is reflecting back with perfect fidelity the frequency that is still running, still asking to be recognized, still waiting for the moment when you will stop looking at the reflection and turn instead toward the source. The source is always a wound that became a belief, a moment or a series of moments in which something happened and your system drew a conclusion, not a wrong conclusion, given what was available to you at the time, but a conclusion that calcified into a permanent truth about the nature of life, of love, of your own worthiness to receive what you most needed. And from that moment forward, every new experience was filtered through that conclusion, interpreted in its light, shaped, often unconsciously, to confirm it. Changing your frequency does not mean pretending the wound is not there. It means going to the belief itself, the original conclusion, the ancient decision your nervous system made about what life was, and offering it something it has never received. Not argument, not evidence, not the logical case for why it is incorrect. Presence, the quality of attention that says, I see you. I understand why you formed, and you no longer need to organize my entire life around keeping me safe from something that already happened. That is the shift, not dramatic, not instantaneous, but real in a way that no external rearrangement has ever managed to be. Because it happens at the level of the frequency itself, not the level of the circumstances the frequency was generating. And once the frequency shifts, genuinely at the root, the pattern does not fight you. It simply dissolves, because it was never a force in its own right. It was always just a reflection, and you were always the light. The silence between your thoughts is where you actually live. There is a place you have visited without knowing you were visiting it. You have been there in the space between waking and sleep, when the mind has not yet assembled its agenda for the day and something quieter than thought is briefly, perfectly present. You have been there in the middle of a long walk when the internal monologue exhausted itself and fell away, and you were simply moving through the world without commentary. You have been there in moments of genuine beauty, a particular quality of evening light, a piece of music that arrived at exactly the wrong moment and became the right one, the face of someone you love in an unguarded instant, when the part of you that narrates everything went silent and you were simply, completely, unutterably here. Those moments did not feel like absence. They felt like arrival. What arrived was you, the version of you that exists beneath the continuous production of thought, beneath the editorial voice that is always assessing, comparing, planning, remembering, anticipating, constructing the ongoing story of who you are and what your life means and whether it is going the way it should. That voice is not you. It is something you do. And the silence between its words is not a gap in your experience. It is the ground of your experience. It is where you actually live, when you are not too busy narrating the living to notice it. The contemplative traditions of every culture across every recorded century have pointed here, not to doctrine, not to ritual, not to the accumulation of spiritual knowledge or the performance of correct belief, to this, to the living silence that underlies the noise of mental activity, the way the ocean underlies its own waves. The wave is real, the motion is real, but the wave is not separate from the water, and the thought is not separate from the awareness in which it arises. You are the awareness, not the thought. This is not a philosophical position to be debated. It is a direct recognition available to anyone willing to sit still long enough to notice what is already the case. The thought moves through you. The emotion moves through you. The sensation, the memory, the plan, the fear, all of it moves through the space of your awareness the way weather moves through sky. The sky does not become the storm. It does not need to recover from the storm. It is simply the space in which the storm occurs, and then the space in which the storm dissolves, unchanged, undiminished, present before and after and throughout. You are that sky. You have always been that sky, and the suffering that has felt most fundamental, the suffering of being at the mercy of your own mind, of being dragged through emotional weather you did not choose and cannot control, comes not from the weather itself, but from the mistaken identification with it, from believing that you are the storm when you have always been the space in which the storm moves. This is what meditation has always been trying to teach, underneath all the techniques and traditions and varying instructions, not the suppression of thought, not the achievement of a permanently calm mental state, simply the practice of returning, again and again, to the awareness that is watching, to the silent presence that has been here for every thought you have ever had and has never once been disturbed by any of them. The thoughts that frighten you most have passed through it. The grief that felt unsurvivable passed through it. The joy that seemed like it would last forever passed through it. The version of you that was certain about everything, and the version of you that was certain about nothing, both passed through it, and it remained, unchanged, quietly and completely itself. This is your most fundamental nature, not your personality, which shifts, not your beliefs, which evolve, not your emotional state, which moves like weather across a landscape that is always underneath the movement. Still, your most fundamental nature is the awareness itself, the pure, contentless presence in which all of your experience arises, unfolds, and dissolves. When you are identified with the thought, when you believe you are the voice in your head rather than the awareness listening to it, every thought has authority. Every fear is a fact. Every self-critical narrative is a true report on your actual value. Every anxious projection about the future is a genuine preview of what is coming. The mind becomes a hall of mirrors, each reflection confirming the others, and there is no place to stand outside of it that offers perspective or relief. But when you find the silence, even briefly, even imperfectly, even for the space of 3 deliberate breaths taken with the genuine intention of returning to the ground beneath the noise, something changes that no external circumstance could produce. The thoughts do not disappear, but they lose their absolute authority. They become what they actually are. Movements in the space of your awareness, rather than the walls of a room you cannot leave. From that space, you can feel the emotion without becoming it. You can hear the fear without obeying it. You can notice the pattern without being governed by it. You can make a choice that comes from your actual depth, rather than from the reactive surface of a mind that has been running on its own momentum for so long, it has forgotten that you are the one who is supposed to be driving. The silence between your thoughts is not empty. It is the most full thing available to you. It is where intuition speaks, because intuition cannot be heard over the noise of constant mental production. It is where genuine creativity originates. It is where the sense of connection, to other people, to the living world, to the thread of meaning that runs through your particular life, is most directly, most undeniably felt. You do not need to build this place. You cannot build it. It is already here. It has been here through everything, through every difficulty and every joy and every ordinary Tuesday and every moment of your life that felt like it might break you and did not. It is here right now, beneath these words, beneath the voice reading them, beneath the thoughts those words are generating in you. Find it, not later, not after you have solved the other things. Now. That is where you live. The art of letting go without losing yourself. There is a misunderstanding about letting go that has caused more suffering than holding on ever did. The misunderstanding is this: that letting go means not caring. That it requires the erasure of feeling, the cultivation of indifference, the achievement of some elevated state in which the things that once mattered to you simply no longer do. That it is a kind of spiritual amputation, cutting away the part of you that wants, that grieves, that reaches toward what it loves, and that the success of the letting go can be measured by how little you feel afterward. This version of letting go is not liberation. It is dissociation wearing the clothing of wisdom. And if you have ever tried it, if you have ever attempted to release something by talking yourself out of caring about it, by constructing a philosophical case for its unimportance, by deciding that wanting less is the same as living more freely, you already know that it does not work. The thing you tried to release does not leave. It goes underground where it continues to operate without your awareness, shaping your choices and your emotional life from a depth you can no longer see or reach. Real letting go is something entirely different, and it begins not with the withdrawal of caring, but with the fullest possible acknowledgement of it. You cannot release what you have not first allowed yourself to fully hold. This is the step that almost everyone skips, because it is the most uncomfortable one. To hold something fully means to let it be as large as it actually is, without immediately reaching for the framework that makes it manageable, without rushing toward the lesson or the silver lining or the evidence that you are handling it with appropriate grace. It means letting the grief be grief before it becomes growth, letting the love be love before it becomes loss, letting the anger be anger before it becomes insight, not indefinitely, but long enough and with enough honest attention that the thing you are carrying knows it has been genuinely seen. Because here is what the soul requires before it can release anything. It needs to know that you are not releasing it because it did not matter. The soul will not release what it suspects you are abandoning. It will only release what it trusts you are honoring. What it knows at the deepest level, you have genuinely loved and genuinely grieved and genuinely allowed to be as significant as it was. This is why the people who seem to let go most easily are not the ones who care least. They are the ones who have learned to love without gripping, who have discovered that the intensity of their caring does not require the permanence of the form their caring takes, that they can love something completely and still release it when its season ends. That loss does not diminish the value of what was lost. It consecrates it. That trust is the actual work, and it is not achieved through detachment. It is achieved through the accumulation of evidence that you have survived before, that you have stood in the ruins of something you were certain was essential to your life, and discovered, against all expectation, that your life continued. That something in you, the awareness, the ground, the sky beneath the storm, was still there on the other side of the loss, unchanged, not happy, not unaffected, not pretending nothing had happened, but present, still here, still capable of feeling the next thing. Every loss you have survived is evidence of something more fundamental than resilience, of the continuity of your own being across every disruption to the form your being has taken. You are not the relationship that ended. You are not the version of your life that collapsed. You are not the dream that did not become real or the person you were before the thing happened that changed everything. You were present for all of those forms, and you are present now, in this form, and you will be present in whatever form comes next. Letting go is not the release of what matters. It is the recognition that what matters most cannot be lost, because it is not located in the thing you are releasing. It is located in you, in the quality of attention you brought to it, in the way it changed you, opened you, called something forward in you that would not have come any other way. That cannot be taken. That does not leave when the form leaves. That is yours, woven permanently into the fabric of what you are. This is what the Zen tradition means when it speaks of non-attachment, not the absence of love, but the absence of the grip, the capacity to be fully present with something, fully invested, fully feeling, fully here, without requiring it to be permanent in order to justify your presence in it. To love the flower without demanding that it not be a flower. To receive the season fully, knowing it is a season, and to release it when it turns without retroactively deciding it should not have mattered because it did not last. The grief of losing something real is not a sign that you were wrong to love it. It is the seal of authenticity on the love itself. Only what was genuinely loved is genuinely grieved, and only what has been genuinely grieved can be genuinely released. Not abandoned, not suppressed, not managed into silence, but set down with the kind of care you give to something sacred, placed gently, honored in the placing, and then released. You do not lose yourself in the letting go. You find yourself, again, as you always have, on the other side of what you were certain you could not survive, smaller than nothing, larger than everything, still here. Rebuilding identity after everything falls apart. There is a specific kind of disorientation that arrives not during the collapse but after it. During the collapse, there is still something to do. Crisis has its own momentum, its own demands, its own merciless focus that keeps the deeper questions temporarily at bay. You are managing, surviving, responding, getting through. The mind is occupied, the body is mobilized. There is a strange clarity in catastrophe, not a pleasant one, but a functional one, that carries you through the immediate emergency on something close to autopilot. And then the emergency ends. The acute phase passes. The thing that was falling finishes falling, and what is left is the silence of aftermath. And in that silence, often for the first time, the real question surfaces. Not how do I survive this? You have already answered that by surviving it. But something more unsettling. Something the urgency of crisis was keeping carefully submerged. Who am I now that this is gone? Because the thing that fell apart was not just a circumstance, it was a structure of identity. The relationship that ended was not merely a relationship. It was the context in which a version of you had learned to make sense of yourself. The career that collapsed was not merely employment. It was the scaffolding around which your sense of purpose and competence and forward motion had been organized. The belief that shattered was not merely an idea you held. It was the framework through which the world had been intelligible, and without it the world is suddenly speaking a language you do not recognize. This is the loss beneath the loss, the one that takes longest to name, because it is the most threatening to look at directly. Not just the grief of what is gone, but the vertigo of the self that was built around it, the self that no longer knows how to answer the simplest questions about its own nature, because the answers it had were all dependent on a structure that no longer exists. Most people respond to this vertigo in one of two ways. The first is reconstruction, the urgent, anxious project of rebuilding as quickly as possible, filling the empty space with new external structures that can perform the same identity-organizing function as the ones that fell. A new relationship to replace the old one before the silence gets too loud. A new role, a new ambition, a new story that explains who you are in terms the world will recognize and accept. This is understandable, but the reconstruction built in panic is almost always built on the same foundation as what collapsed, which is why the same structures tend to fall again, and the question that was buried under the new scaffolding resurfaces, eventually, with even greater force. The second response is rarer, more difficult, and the only one that leads somewhere genuinely new. It is the willingness to remain in the dissolution long enough to discover what does not dissolve. When the external structures that have been organizing your sense of self are removed, when the role, the relationship, the belief, the belonging are gone and cannot yet be replaced, what remains? Not what should remain, not what you wish would remain. What actually demonstrably, undeniably remains when everything constructed is stripped away. Awareness remains. Presence remains. The capacity to feel remains, not as a wound, though it may feel like one, but as evidence of aliveness, of a self that is real enough to be affected by what it encounters. Curiosity remains, if you let it. The body remains, with its particular way of moving through space, its preferences and its aversions, its accumulated knowledge of what it means to be alive in this specific form. Values remain, not the ones that were inherited from external structures, not the ones that serve the identity that has now collapsed, but the ones that have always been quietly present beneath all of it, waiting for the scaffolding to be removed so they could finally be seen. The identity that emerges from genuine dissolution is not a reconstruction of what was lost. It is a discovery of what was always there beneath it, more honest than the version that needed external structure to feel real, more durable because it is not dependent on any single form continuing to exist, more yours because it was found rather than performed. The collapse did not erase you. It revealed you. And what was revealed, stripped of everything that was borrowed, maintained for others, built to manage the world's expectations, is the beginning of the only life that was ever actually yours to live. The relationship between suffering and awakening. There is a pattern running through every spiritual tradition that has ever honestly addressed the human condition. It is not the pattern of ascent, of the soul rising steadily from darkness into light through discipline and virtue. It is something stranger than that, something that offends the part of us that wants progress to be linear and suffering to be optional. The pattern is this: the deepest awakenings in human experience do not happen in spite of suffering. They happen through it. Not because suffering is good or because pain is spiritually productive in some automatic way, but because suffering, when it reaches a sufficient depth, dismantles the constructions that were keeping the deeper truth at a manageable distance. The ego, the constructed self, the identity organized around continuity, approval, and control, is very good at one thing above all others: keeping things as they are, maintaining the familiar, protecting the story. It will sacrifice almost anything, including your genuine well-being, in service of its own coherence. And it can do this successfully against almost any challenge life presents, until the challenge is large enough and the pain deep enough that the defenses finally and completely fail. This is the dark night of the soul that mystics across every tradition have described. Not a metaphor for a difficult period, but a specific and recognizable experience of the collapse of every framework that has been substituting for direct encounter with reality. The moment when what you believed about yourself, about life, about the nature of things, can no longer be maintained. When the story breaks and nothing has yet arrived to replace it. This moment is terrifying. It is supposed to be. What is dying is real. The self that organized your life, that knew who you were and what you were doing here, that self is genuinely ending. And grief is the appropriate response to genuine ending, even when what is ending needed to end. But here is what the mystics also said without exception, across every tradition and every century in which this experience has been recorded. On the other side of the dark night, there is a dawn that is nothing like the life that preceded the darkness. Not because the problems are resolved or because the circumstances have improved, or because you have arrived at some elevated state of permanent peace, but because the self that emerges from the dissolution is no longer primarily organized around self-protection. It has been to the bottom of its own fear and found that the bottom was not the end. It has lost the story it was telling about itself and discovered that what it is does not depend on the story. It has survived the unsurvivable thing and received from that survival the most direct possible evidence that what it most fundamentally is cannot be destroyed by anything that can happen to it. This is not wisdom you can be given. It is wisdom that can only be earned through the precise, costly, irreplaceable curriculum of your own undoing. The suffering you have been carrying is not a detour from your awakening. It is the path. What comes after the searching? There is a moment that arrives for people who have been searching long enough that is unlike any other moment in the search. It is not the moment of finding, not the arrival at an answer that resolves the question and ends the seeking. It is something quieter than that, and in some ways more disorienting. It is the moment when you realize that the searching itself has been a form of avoidance, that the restless reaching toward the next understanding, the next practice, the next framework for making sense of your experience, has been keeping you in perpetual motion for a reason, because stillness is where the thing you have been searching for actually lives. And stillness is the one thing the searching has been structured, consciously or not, to prevent. You have been looking for something you cannot look for, not because it does not exist, but because looking is the wrong activity. The thing you have been searching for is not located at the end of the search. It is located at the beginning of the stopping. Every tradition that has ever pointed toward genuine liberation has pointed here, not toward accumulation, more knowledge, more practice, more understanding, but toward subtraction, toward the progressive release of everything that has been layered over the thing that was always already present. The direct recognition, not belief, not intellectual conclusion, but recognition, that what you have been searching for has been the one doing the searching all along. The awareness you have been trying to reach is the awareness that has been reading these words. The presence you have been trying to cultivate is the presence that has been here through every moment of the search, including the moments when the search felt most hopeless. This does not mean the journey was wasted. The journey was necessary, not because it led somewhere other than here, but because it led you to the readiness to be here, fully, without the restless forward motion that characterized every previous moment of your path. You needed to search until the searching was genuinely exhausted, until the part of you that believed the answer was always one more step away had finally completely run out of steps. That exhaustion is not failure, it is arrival. What comes after the searching is not a different life. It is this life, seen from a different ground. The same circumstances, the same relationships, the same body and history, and set of unresolved questions, but encountered now from the place beneath the seeking, from the settled, undefended presence that was always here and is now, finally allowed to be known. The cosmic signs you have been sensing were not pointing somewhere else. They were pointing here, to this, to the awareness that is reading them, to the life that is being lived right now in this body in this moment, with all of its imperfection and uncertainty and unfinished becoming. You were never lost. You were always moving toward the recognition of what you have always been. And that recognition, quiet, complete, requiring nothing further to justify it, is the end of the searching, and the beginning of everything else, the life that was always waiting for you. Everything that has brought you here, the exhaustion, the searching, the pattern that kept repeating, the pain that would not resolve, the signs you sensed but could not name, the long education in everything that does not work, was preparation, not punishment, not evidence of your failure to live correctly. Preparation for the specific life that has been waiting for you on the other side of all of it. That life is not a different life. It is this one, lived from a different center, the center that exists beneath the fear, beneath the performance, beneath the accumulated strategies of a self that was trying to earn its right to exist, the center that has been there since before you knew you were looking for it, stable and unaffected by everything that has happened at the surface, holding the thread of what you actually are through every version of yourself you have inhabited and outgrown. From that center, the choices look different, not easier necessarily, not free from difficulty or loss or the ordinary human weight of being alive in a world that does not organize itself around your preferences, but different in the quality they carry, made from genuine knowing rather than from fear, from what is actually true for you rather than from what you have been told should be true, from the values that were always yours waiting beneath the borrowed ones, patient as everything real is patient, knowing that sooner or later the borrowed things collapse, and what remains is always what was original. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to someone ancient, the self that existed before the world told you who you needed to be, before the fear arrived and began making your decisions, before the long detour through every version of yourself that was organized around survival rather than around truth. That self has never left. It has been here through everything, watching with a quality of attention that your busy, managing, achieving, surviving surface self has rarely been still enough to feel. It knows what you love. It knows what you are here to do. It knows the difference between the life you have been living to manage your fear and the life you were actually made for. The signs you have been sensing were its signals. The exhaustion was its way of telling you that the life you were living was not the one it was waiting to live. The pain was its insistence that there was something more honest, more alive, more genuinely yours available on the other side of the carefully maintained surface. You sensed all of it because you were built to sense it. Because the 1% who can feel the deeper frequency of their experience are not more gifted than others. They are simply less willing to stop feeling. And that refusal, which has cost you so much, which has made the ordinary management of daily life so relentlessly exhausting, is also the precise quality that makes what comes next possible. Only someone who has always felt everything can receive everything. Only someone who refused to stop sensing the deeper current could be standing after all of this, at the edge of a life that is finally, genuinely aligned with what they actually are. You are that person. This is that edge. What comes next is yours. The signs were always real. The frequency was always there. And you, exactly as you are, with everything you have carried and everything you have survived, were always the one they were meant for.